Hello and welcome back to the Wholehearted Living podcast. I'm Debs Thorpe and I'm so glad that you're here. This is episode 7 of series 2, where we're exploring the journey back to wholeness. And today we're diving into something that might be the hardest practice of all for some people, but it's also the most transformative. And that is meeting yourself with kindness. Now, before we go any further, I need to be honest with you about something. And it's not easy for me to admit. I've spent over 20 years as a counsellor, therapist and coach. I've held space for thousands of people with deep compassion, kindness and non-judgment. In the therapy room, I meet people exactly where they are with complete acceptance. But outside of that room, I know I can be incredibly judgmental about myself and others. Harsh, critical, and for a long time, I didn't even realise it. I judged people for their choices. I had relentlessly high standards, not just for myself, but for everyone around me. And I genuinely didn't consider myself a kind person, which is a strange thing to say when your entire career is built on helping people, isn't it? But here's what I've come to understand. My judgment of others was never really about them. It was my inner critic turned outward. The same voice that told me I wasn't good enough, that I should be doing more, that I had to be perfect. That voice didn't just criticise me, it criticised everyone. And it wasn't until I realised the cost of letting that critic run the show that everything began to change. So today we're going to explore why self-compassion is not self-indulgence and why high achievers especially struggle with this, where your inner critic came from and what it's really costing you. We're going to dive into one of the most useful metaphors that I use when it comes to dealing with your inner critic, why stress and exhaustion make the critic even louder and what to do about it, and most importantly, how to actually practice meeting yourself with kindness, even when it feels impossible. This is stage 3 of the wholehearted technique, and it's foundational. Because without compassion, all the other work becomes another way to punish yourself for not being enough yet. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Let's start by clearing up a massive misconception. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It's not letting yourself off the hook. It's not making excuses or avoiding accountability. Self-compassion is treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding and support that you would offer to a dear friend. That's it. That's the definition. But somewhere along the way, many of us learned that being kind to ourselves was dangerous. We learned that if we weren't hard on ourselves, we'd become lazy, selfish or complacent. We learned that criticism was the only thing keeping us in line. And so we internalized a voice, a harsh, relentless inner critic that tells us, you're not good enough, you should have known better, what's wrong with you? Everyone else has it figured out, why don't you? And we believe that this voice is helping us. We believe it's motivating us. We believe it's keeping us safe. But here's the truth. Your inner critic is not keeping you safe, it's keeping you small. Research shows that self-criticism actually decreases motivation, increases anxiety and depression, and keeps you stuck in shame. It doesn't make you better, it makes you afraid. Self-compassion, on the other hand, increases resilience, motivation, and the ability to learn from mistakes. It doesn't make you complacent, it makes you brave. Because when you know you'll meet yourself with kindness no matter what happens, you're willing to take risks. You're willing to try. You're willing to fail and get back up. Self-compassion is not weakness. It's the foundation of wholeness. Now, I want to talk specifically to the high achievers listening because I know many of you are. You're the visionaries, the creatives, the entrepreneurs, the healers, the ones who are always pushing, always growing, always reaching for more. And if that's you, I need you to hear this. Your inner critic is not what made you successful. It's what's keeping you from experiencing your success. Let me explain. High achievers have a particularly vicious relationship with their inner critic, because for you, that critical voice isn't just harsh, it's strategic. It sounds like this: if you're not constantly pushing, you'll fall behind. If you're satisfied with where you are, you'll stop growing. If you're kind to yourself, you'll get complacent. Your standards are what make you excellent. Don't lower them. And here's the thing: this voice has gotten you results. You've achieved things, you've built things, you've created things. And every time you did that, that critical voice was there saying, good, but not good enough yet, keep going. You've come to believe that the criticism is what drives you, that without it, you'd lose your edge. You'd become mediocre. You'd stop mattering. But I want you to consider something. What if your inner critic isn't what made you successful? What if you succeeded despite it, not because of it? Here's what I see with high achievers all the time. You achieve something incredible, like a promotion, a successful launch, a milestone, a breakthrough. And instead of celebrating, you immediately move the goalpost. Okay, that was good, but now I need to. You're never satisfied. You're never enough. The finish line keeps moving. And underneath all that achievement, you're exhausted, you're burned out, you're disconnected from joy, from presence, from the very life you're working so hard to build. You're succeeding on the outside, but you're suffering on the inside. That's the cost of letting your inner critic drive. It gets you results, yes, but it also gets you chronic stress and anxiety, burnout and exhaustion, imposter syndrome. So no matter how much you achieve, you never feel enough. Inability to celebrate or rest, disconnection from yourself and others, a constant feeling of not enough. And here's one you might not expect: judgment of others. Because here's what I learned about myself. When your inner critic is relentlessly harsh with you, it doesn't stay contained. It leaks out onto everyone around you. My high standards for myself became high standards for everyone else. My judgment of my own imperfections became judgment of others' imperfections. I didn't realize I was doing it. I thought I was just being discerning, having standards, expecting excellence. But really, I was projecting my own inner critic outward. And the most painful part, you never get to actually enjoy what you've created because the critic won't let you. It says, that was just the beginning. Now you have to maintain it. Now you have to do more. Now you have to prove it wasn't a fluke. So you keep running and running and running. And you call it ambition, you call it drive, you call it excellence. But really, it's just fear wearing a success suit. Let's dismantle the myth of my inner critic makes me successful once and for all. Your inner critic did not make you successful. Your vision, your creativity, your work ethic, your intelligence, your resilience, those made you successful. Your inner critic just convinced you that you had to suffer to deserve it. Think about it. When have you done your best work? Was it when you were terrified of failure, criticizing every move, white-knuckling your way through? Or was it when you were in flow? When you were excited, curious, energized? When you felt safe enough to take risks and try new things? I'm willing to bet it was the latter. Research backs this up. Studies show that self-compassion actually increases motivation because you're not paralyzed by the fear of failure, resilience because you can bounce back from setbacks, creativity because you're not afraid to experiment, performance because you're not wasting energy on self-criticism, and sustainable success because you're not burning out. Self-criticism, on the other hand, increases anxiety, depression, perfectionism, and burnout. It might get you short-term results, but it's not sustainable. You don't need your inner critic to be successful. You need self-compassion to be sustainably successful. Here's the question I want you to sit with. Are you driven by fear or are you driven by love? Fear says, if I don't keep pushing, I'll fail. I'll be exposed. I'll lose everything. Love says, I'm creating because I'm called to, because it matters, because I have something to offer. Fear says, I have to prove I'm enough. Love says, I'm already enough and I'm choosing to grow. Fear says, rest is dangerous, stopping means falling behind. Love says, rest is how I sustain myself for the long journey. High achievers, I want you to hear this. You can be ambitious and compassionate. You can have high standards and be kind to yourself. You can strive for excellence without punishing yourself for being human. In fact, self-compassion doesn't lower your standards, it raises your capacity to meet them. Because when you're not wasting energy on self-criticism, shame, and fear, you have more energy for the actual work, for the creativity, for the vision. When you meet yourself with kindness, no matter what happens, you're willing to take bigger risks. You're willing to fail and learn. You're willing to innovate. Self-compassion doesn't make you complacent, it makes you brave. Now I want to share with you a metaphor I use all the time with my clients, and it's one that completely changed how I understand my inner world. Imagine all the various parts of yourself are passengers on a bus. You've got the nurturer, the critic, the inner child, the protector, the rebel, the perfectionist, the wise one, the playful one. All these parts are on the bus together. They all have a voice and they all have a role. But here's the question: who's driving the bus? For most of my life, the inner critic was driving the bus. And let me tell you, the vibe on that bus was not a nice one. The critic is at the wheel, white knuckling it, barking orders, criticising every turn, every decision, every moment of rest. We're not going fast enough. Why did you take that route? You should have known better. Everyone else is ahead of us. We're falling behind. And all the other parts, they're sitting in the back silent, terrified, because if they speak up, if the inner child says, I'm tired, can we take a rest? Or if the nurturer says, maybe we need to slow down, the critic will character assassinate them. You're weak, you're lazy, you're pathetic, sit down and be quiet. So they do. They sit in silence and the critic keeps driving. And here's what happens. The bus becomes a prison. No one feels safe, no one can speak, no one can breathe. The critic thinks it's protecting everyone by staying in control, but really it's suffocating everyone. And eventually, the bus crashes. Burnout, breakdown, collapse, because the critic doesn't know when to stop. It doesn't know how to rest. It only knows how to push. That's what happens when your inner critic is driving. So, here's what I want you to try. Spend some time changing the driver. Take your critic out of the driver's seat and put them in the back of the bus. Not off the bus. They're still there, they're still part of you, but they're not driving anymore. And then put your coach in charge, or your wise self, or your compassionate self, whatever you want to call it, the part of you that's kind, grounded, that's wise. Now observe, feel what changes. When the coach is driving, the entire vibe on the bus shifts. The coach says, okay, everyone, where are we going? What do we need? The inner child speaks up. I'm tired, can we take a rest? And instead of being criticised, the coach says, thank you for telling me. Yes, let's pull over and rest. The nurturer says, we've been pushing really hard. We need to eat something nourishing. The coach says, you're right. Let's take care of ourselves. The perfectionist says, but we're not there yet. We have so much more to do. And the coach says, I hear you, and we'll get there, but we're going to do it sustainably. Okay, we're not going to crash the bus trying to arrive 5 minutes earlier. Do you feel the difference? When the coach is driving, everyone on the bus feels safe. Everyone has a voice. Everyone is welcome. The critic is still there in the back seat, and sometimes it pipes up, we should be going faster, we should be doing this. And the coach can acknowledge it. I hear you, thank you for trying to keep us safe, but I've got this. You can rest now. When the coach is driving, you're not running from fear, you're moving towards love. So I want you to try this just for a day. just one day. Notice when your critic is driving, notice the vibe on your internal bus, then consciously change the driver, put your coach in charge, and observe what changes. How do you speak to yourself? How do you make decisions? How do you respond to mistakes? How do you treat your body? How do you interact with others? Play with this, experiment, notice. Because here's the truth, you get to choose who drives the bus. The critic has been driving for so long, you might think it's the only option, but it's not. You can change the driver anytime you want. Now, here's something really important I need you to understand. When you're stressed, exhausted, or depleted, physically, emotionally, or mentally, you will default to old familiar patterns. This is not failure, this is biology. When your nervous system is under stress, it doesn't have the energy to practice new ways of being. It reverts to what's familiar, what's automatic, what's been wired in for years. And for most of us, that means the critic takes the wheel again. You know, you might be doing really well. You've been practicing self-compassion, you've changed the driver, your coach has been in charge for days, maybe even weeks. And then something happens. You get sick, you have a stressful week at work, you have a conflict with someone you love. You don't sleep well for a few nights, and suddenly the inner critic is back, louder than ever. See, you're failing again. You can't even keep this up. What's wrong with you? And it's so sneaky, because now the critic is criticizing you for not being compassionate enough. Be aware of this, because it can feed the critic very easily. Honestly, when I'm depleted, my inner critic can feel like a demon or an ogre. It's not just a voice anymore. It's like a presence, a weight, a darkness that takes over everything. It's vicious, it's relentless, it twists everything into evidence of my inadequacy. I made a small mistake, the demon says I'm incompetent. I need rest, the ogre says I'm lazy and pathetic. I'm struggling, it tells me everyone else has it together and I'm uniquely broken. And when I'm in that state, exhausted, depleted, running on empty, I don't have the resources to fight back. I don't have the energy to change the driver. You know, I'm just about getting through the day and functioning, let alone practicing self-compassion. And that's when the critic is most dangerous, because it knows you're vulnerable, it knows you're too tired to defend yourself, and so it goes for the jugular. So here's what I want you to do when you find yourself in the grip of your inner critic, when it feels like a demon or an ogre has taken over. First, take a breath. Just one. You don't have to fix anything, you don't have to be compassionate yet, just breathe. Second, ask yourself, am I depleted right now? Not what's wrong with me, not why can't I handle this. Simply, am I physically, emotionally, or mentally depleted right now? If the answer is yes, which it almost always is when the critic is this loud, then you need to know something. This is not a character flaw, this is not the work not working. This is a nervous system response. Your system is under stress, your resources are low, your brain has reverted to old wiring because it doesn't have the energy for anything else. You're depleted. So when you realize this and the critic has taken over, here's what I want you to do. Firstly, stop trying to practice compassion. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but hear me out. When you're this depleted, trying to force yourself to be compassionate just becomes another thing the critic can beat you up about. See, you can't even be kind to yourself. You're failing at self-compassion too. So instead, just acknowledge, I'm too depleted to practice right now, and that's okay. Secondly, distract yourself from the critic. You don't have to engage with it. You don't have to argue with it. You don't have to prove it wrong. Just step away. Watch something comforting, listen to music, take a walk, call a friend. Do something, anything that gives your brain a break from the relentless criticism. This isn't avoidance, this is survival. This is giving yourself space to replenish. Thirdly, replenish yourself. You cannot practice new ways of being when you're running on empty. You just can't. So ask yourself, what do I need to replenish? Do you need sleep? Take a nap, go to bed early. Sleep is not optional. Do you need food? Eat something nourishing. Your brain literally cannot regulate without fuel. Do you need rest? Cancel something, say no to something, give yourself permission to do less. Do you need connection? Reach out to someone safe. You don't have to explain everything, just be with someone who doesn't require you to perform. Do you need to move? Go for a walk, stretch, dance, let your body release some of the stress. Replenishment is not selfish, it's necessary. And here's the thing, once you've replenished, once you've slept, eaten, rested, moved, the critic will quiet down. Not because you've defeated it, but because your nervous system is no longer in survival mode. The critic thrives in depletion. Compassion requires resources. I also want you to hear this. It's okay to be battle weary sometimes. You're not supposed to be on all the time. You're not supposed to be perfectly compassionate, perfectly grounded, perfectly present every single moment. You're human. You get tired, you get depleted, you have hard days, hard weeks, hard seasons. And when you're in those moments, the critic will show up. It just will. But that doesn't mean you failed. That doesn't mean you're back at square one. It doesn't mean all your work has been for nothing. It just means you're tired and you need a rest. The practice isn't about never hearing the critic again. It's about recognizing when it's taking over, understanding why, and knowing how to care for yourself until you have the resources to change the driver again. So when you find yourself in the grip of the critic, when it feels like that demon or ogre, remember this. You're not failing, you're depleted. And depletion is not a character flaw, it's information. It's your body saying, I need care, I need rest, I need nourishment. So give that to yourself without guilt, without shame, without making it mean something about your worth. You're allowed to be tired, you're allowed to need rest, you are allowed to be human. And when you've rested, when you've replenished, and when you have the resources again, you can change the driver. You can practice compassion. You can return to yourself. But for now, just rest. It's okay to be battle weary. It's temporary, okay? Allow it. So let's talk about that voice, shall we? The inner critic, the one that's been running the show for so long. Here's what you need to understand. Your inner critic is not your voice. It's an internalized voice from your past. Think about it. When you criticize yourself, whose voice are you actually hearing? Is it a parent who was never satisfied, a teacher who made you feel small, a culture that told you you weren't enough unless you were perfect, a partner who criticized you, a society that profits from your insecurity? Most of the time, the voice in your head isn't even yours. It's someone else's judgment that you've taken on as truth. And here's the thing, that voice showed up for a reason. It was trying to protect you. If you learned that love was conditional, that you were only valued when you performed, achieved, or pleased others, then your inner critic became your survival mechanism. It said, if I criticize you first, maybe you'll be good enough. Maybe you'll avoid rejection. Maybe you'll finally feel safe. Your inner critic thought it was keeping you safe, but it was actually keeping you small. So I want you to try something right now if you're in a place where you can. Think of something you recently criticized yourself for. Maybe you made a mistake at work. Maybe you snapped at someone you love. Maybe you didn't follow through on something you said you'd do. Now, notice the voice that criticizes you. What does it say? Oh, you're so stupid. You always mess things up. You're never going to get it right. Now ask yourself, whose voice is that really? Does it sound like a parent, a teacher, a partner, a sibling, society? Close your eyes and just see if you can identify where that voice came from. Because once you realise it's not your voice, it's someone else's that you internalised, you can start to question it. You can start to say, that's not the truth of who I am. That's just an old recording playing in my head. And that's the beginning of the freedom. So if your inner critic isn't what drives you, what does? I want to introduce you to a different voice, not the critic, the coach. Your inner critic says, you're not doing enough, you're failing, what's wrong with you? Your inner coach says, that was hard and you showed up anyway. What can we learn from this? How can we adjust? Your inner critic says, you should have known better. You always mess things up. Your inner coach says, you made a mistake. That's how you grow. What do you need right now to move forward? Your inner critic says, everyone else is ahead of you. You're falling behind. Your inner coach says, you're on your own timeline. You're exactly where you need to be. Keep going. Do you feel the difference? The critic tears you down. The coach builds you up. The critic keeps you small and afraid. The coach helps you to grow and expand. The critic is rooted in shame. The coach is rooted in compassion. You don't need to get rid of your drive, your ambition, or your standards. You just need to change the voice that's holding them. Here's how you practice this shift. Notice when the critic is speaking. Just be aware. Oh, that's just my critic. Then thank it for trying to help. I know this sounds strange, but the critic genuinely thinks it's protecting you. So acknowledge that. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. I know you're scared, but I've got this. Then ask, what would my coach say right now? If your wise, compassionate, grounded self was speaking, what would they say? Write it down, say it out loud, let that voice have some space. And then practice, practice, practice. This won't happen overnight. Your critic has been driving for years, maybe even decades. But every time you notice it and choose the coach instead, you're rewiring your brain. You're creating new pathways, and it does get easier, I promise. So, how do you actually practice self-compassion? Especially if it feels completely foreign right now. So, here are some practices you can start with. Practice 1, the self-compassion break. This is from Dr. Christian Neff and is incredibly powerful. When you're struggling, place your hand on your heart and say these 3 things. This is a moment of suffering. This acknowledges what happens without judgment. You're just naming it. Then say, suffering is part of being human. This is reminding yourself that you're not alone, that everyone struggles. And then say, may I be kind to myself in this moment. Offer yourself the compassion you'd offer a friend. You know, you can adapt these words to whatever feels natural for you. Like, this is really hard right now. I'm not the only one who feels this way. May I give myself the compassion I need? You can try it right now. Place your hand on your heart and speak those words to yourself. Okay, practice number 2 is reframing your inner critic. When you notice your inner critic speaking, pause and reframe it with compassion. For example, your critic saying something like, you're so stupid for making that mistake. Reframing it to that coach's voice. Okay, I made a mistake. I'm human. I'm learning. Critic, you should be over this by now. Coach, healing doesn't have a timeline. I'm exactly where I need to be. Critic, everyone else has it together. What's wrong with you? Coach, everyone struggles. I'm not uniquely broken. I'm just human. So you can write down some of your most common critical thoughts and then rewrite them with compassion. And practice 3, write a compassionate letter to yourself. So think of something you're struggling with right now, something you're judging yourself for. Now imagine a dear friend came to you with that exact struggle. What would you say to them? Write them a letter, Pour out all of the compassion, understanding and kindness you would offer. Then read it back to yourself, because you deserve the same compassion you so freely give to others. Practice 4, safe touch. We talked about this in episode 4, but it's worth repeating here. Touch is one of the most powerful ways to signal safety and compassion to your nervous system. Place your hands on your heart, your belly, or your face. Hold yourself gently. Stroke your arms and say, I'm here, you're safe, I've got you. This is self-compassion in action. You're literally holding yourself the way you wish someone had held you. And practice 5, daily compassion practice. Every evening, write one thing today I'm proud of myself for. It doesn't have to be big. It can be, I got out of bed even though I didn't want to, or I asked for help, or I was honest about how I was feeling. I rested when I needed to. This practice trains your brain to notice what you're doing right instead of only what you're doing wrong. Here's what I want you to take away from this episode. You cannot heal what you reject. You can only heal what you meet with compassion. Your inner critic is not the truth about who you are. It's an old recording, a survival mechanism, a voice you internalize to try to keep yourself safe. But you don't need that voice anymore. You're safe now and you deserve kindness. Self-compassion is not weakness. It's not self-indulgence. It's the foundation of wholeness. Because when you meet yourself with compassion, you stop running from yourself. You stop trying to fix, prove, or perform your way into worthiness. You just come home. So some practices to try this week. So firstly, play with the best metaphor. Notice when your critic is driving, consciously change the driver, put your coach in charge, and observe what shifts. Secondly, watch for depletion. When the critic gets loud, ask yourself, am I depleted right now? If yes, stop trying to practice compassion, just focus on replenishment. Distract yourself from the critic until you have resources again. Thirdly, choose one of the compassionate practices we talked about. Maybe it's reframing your critic. Maybe it's just placing your hand on your heart and saying, I'm here, you're safe, I've got you. Whatever you choose, practice it, even when it feels awkward, even when it feels like you don't deserve it. You do deserve it. You always have. So in episode 8 next week, we're moving into stage 4 of the wholehearted technique, which is all about aligned boundaries. We're going to talk about why saying no without guilt is an act of self-respect, how to set boundaries that actually stick, and what to do when people push back. Because compassion for yourself also means protecting your energy, and that's what we'll explore next. Until then, be gentle with yourself. Notice when the critic is driving, change the driver when you can, and when you can't, when you're too depleted, just rest. It's okay to be battle weary. You're still whole. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. Thank you for choosing to meet yourself with kindness, and I look forward to seeing you next week.